"I will not let you go unless you bless me." These words, spoken by Jacob as he wrestled with God, changed the course of history. But what led to this pivotal moment? In the next few minutes, we'll trace Jacob's journey from deceiver to patriarch, exploring how God uses even our flaws to fulfill his greater purpose. Get ready for a story of rivalry, romance, and divine encounters. Two brothers born grasping at each other's heels, a prophecy of conflict from the very beginning. Our story begins with Isaac and Rebekah, a couple deeply in love but facing a heartbreaking struggle. Despite their faith and devotion, they remained childless for 20 long years. In ancient times, infertility was often seen as a sign of divine disfavor, adding to their emotional burden. Desperate for a child, Isaac pleaded with God on behalf of his wife. His prayers were answered, but in an unexpected way. Rebekah finally conceived, but her joy was soon mixed with concern. She felt an unusual struggle within her womb, as if her unborn children were already at odds. Seeking understanding, she turned to God for guidance. The Lord's response was both a blessing and a warning. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." This prophecy set the stage for a lifelong rivalry that would shape not just two brothers, but two nations. When the time came, Rebekah gave birth to twins. The first to emerge was Esau, red and hairy, his appearance as striking as his future would be. Close behind, quite literally holding onto Esau's heel, came Jacob. From their very first breath, these brothers were distinct in both appearance and temperament. As the boys grew, their differences became even more pronounced. Esau developed into a skilled hunter, a man of the open country. He was bold, impulsive, and lived for the moment. Jacob, on the other hand, was quiet and thoughtful, preferring to stay among the tents. He was calculating and always planning for the future. These contrasting personalities led to an unfortunate dynamic within the family. Isaac, perhaps drawn to Esau's rugged masculinity, favored his firstborn. Rebekah, however, formed a special bond with Jacob, appreciating his gentle nature and quick mind. This parental favoritism only served to deepen the rift between the brothers, sowing seeds of resentment and jealousy that would bear bitter fruit in years to come. In this context, the concept of birthright took on immense significance. In ancient cultures, the firstborn son held a position of great honor and responsibility. He would inherit the largest portion of his father's wealth and assume leadership of the family. For Esau, this birthright was his by nature of being born first. For Jacob, it represented everything he desired but could not claim. It's worth noting that Jacob's very name reflected his nature. In Hebrew, Jacob means he grasps the heel, which can also be interpreted as he deceives. This name would prove prophetic, foreshadowing Jacob's future actions and the complex path his life would take. But Jacob's cunning would soon lead to a fateful decision, one that would alter the course of both brothers' lives and set in motion events that would echo through generations to come. Have you ever made a rash decision when you were famished? Now imagine if that decision could change the destiny of entire peoples. As Esau stumbled home from his hunt, exhausted and starving, he had no idea he was about to walk into a trap that would alter the course of biblical history. Picture the scene. Esau, the skilled hunter, returns from a long day in the wilderness. His muscles ache, his stomach growls, and the scent of a savory meal fills the air. It's Jacob's lentil stew, a simple yet nourishing dish common in the ancient Middle East. The aroma of onions, garlic, and spices wafts through the camp, irresistible to a man on the brink of collapse from hunger. Jacob, ever the opportunist, sees his chance. He offers his famished brother a bowl of the steaming stew, but there's a catch. In exchange, Jacob wants Esau's birthright, the privileged position of the firstborn son, which includes leadership of the family and a double portion of the inheritance. It's an outrageous request, seemingly absurd in its disproportion. A lifetime of honor and wealth for a single meal. Surely Esau would refuse, but hunger can cloud judgment, and Esau's impulsive nature gets the better of him. "Look, I am about to die," he declares dramatically. "What good is the birthright to me?" In this moment of weakness, Esau fails to consider the long-term consequences of his actions. He trades away his future for immediate gratification, a decision that will haunt him and shape the destiny of nations. The significance of this exchange cannot be overstated. In ancient societies, the birthright was more than just material wealth. It carried spiritual responsibilities and the promise of carrying on the family legacy. By treating it so casually, Esau demonstrates a lack of appreciation for these deeper values, prioritizing his physical needs over his spiritual and familial duties. As Esau wolfs down the lentil stew, satisfying his immediate hunger, he's oblivious to the fact that he's set in motion events that will echo through generations. The text tells us that Esau despised his birthright, a strong statement that reveals not just regret, but a fundamental misunderstanding of its value. This moment of weakness becomes a defining characteristic of Esau, one that will shape how he's viewed in biblical tradition. The consequences of this hasty decision won't be immediately apparent, but they're already taking root. Jacob, through his cunning, has secured a position that by birth was not his. He's taken the first step on a path that will lead to further deception, family strife, and ultimately a profound spiritual transformation. But Jacob's journey of deception was far from over. This exchange over a bowl of stew was just the beginning, setting the stage for an even more audacious act that would drive a wedge between the brothers and alter the course of their lives forever. Imagine a world where a single whispered blessing could determine the course of history. Now picture that power in the hands of a blind man, easily deceived by touch and smell. How far would you go to ensure that blessing fell on your shoulders? As Isaac felt his life drawing to a close, he decided it was time to pass on the family blessing to his firstborn son, Esau. This wasn't just a sentimental gesture, it was a sacred rite that would shape the future of their lineage. Isaac instructed Esau to hunt game and prepare a meal, after which he would receive the coveted blessing. But Rebekah overheard this plan and saw an opportunity. She quickly devised a scheme to secure the blessing for her favorite son, Jacob. The deception she orchestrated was both elaborate and daring. Jacob was instructed to dress in Esau's clothes, their familiar scent masking his true identity. To complete the illusion, Rebekah covered Jacob's smooth hands and neck with goatskins, mimicking Esau's hairy texture. As Jacob approached his father, the tension was palpable. Would Isaac see through the ruse? Jacob's heart must have raced as he presented the meal and engaged in conversation, doing his best to imitate his brother's manner of speech. When Isaac's suspicions were raised by the sound of Jacob's voice, the goatskins proved crucial in maintaining the deception. The moral implications of Jacob's actions are complex. On one hand, he was directly deceiving his father and cheating his brother. Yet, Rebekah justified the plan as fulfilling God's prophecy that the older would serve the younger. This tension between divine will and human deception raises profound questions about morality and the nature of God's plan. Isaac's reaction to the deception was one of shock and trembling. As he realized he had been tricked into blessing Jacob instead of Esau, he was faced with the irrevocable nature of the spoken blessing. His words, "Indeed he will be blessed," underscore the power and finality of the patriarchal blessing in their culture. As Jacob basked in his ill-gotten gain, the air was thick with anticipation of Esau's return. The blessing Jacob received was no small matter. It included promises of material prosperity, political dominion, and divine favor. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. When Esau discovered the theft of his blessing, his anguished response revealed the deep emotional and spiritual wound inflicted by Jacob's deception. The coveted blessing had been given, and it could not be undone. Jacob had secured his future, but at a tremendous cost. The bond of brotherhood was shattered, and the consequences of his actions would soon force him to flee from the very family he had schemed to lead. Dreams have long been seen as windows to the divine. But what if your dream became a doorway to God himself? As Jacob lay down to rest, exhausted and alone, he was about to experience a vision that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his place in the world. Jacob's flight from home was a journey into uncertainty. With his brother's fury burning hot behind him, he traveled through unfamiliar terrain, each step taking him further from the life he had known. As night fell, Jacob found himself in a desolate place, vulnerable and exposed. With nothing but a stone for a pillow, he settled down to sleep, unaware that this ordinary spot would soon become sacred ground. As Jacob slept, a remarkable vision unfolded before him. He saw a ladder or stairway reaching from earth to heaven, with angels of God ascending and descending upon it. This powerful imagery symbolized more than just a connection between the earthly and divine realms. It represented God's active involvement in human affairs, a bridge between the spiritual and physical worlds. At the top of the ladder stood the Lord himself, who spoke directly to Jacob. God reaffirmed the covenant he had made with Abraham, promising Jacob that his descendants would be as numerous as the dust of the earth and would spread out in all directions. This wasn't just a repetition of an old promise, it was a personal assurance to Jacob that he, despite his flaws and mistakes, was part of God's grand plan. The significance of this dream extends beyond its immediate impact on Jacob. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, dreams were often viewed as significant messages from the divine. This particular vision, with its vivid imagery and direct divine communication, would have been understood as a profound spiritual encounter, one that legitimized Jacob's position as heir to the covenant. As Jacob awoke, the reality of what he had experienced began to sink in. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it," he exclaimed. This moment marked a turning point in Jacob's spiritual journey. The man who had relied on his own cunning and deception was now face to face with the awesome presence of God. In response to this divine encounter, Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as a pillar, pouring oil on top of it. This act of consecration transformed an ordinary location into a holy site, which Jacob named Bethel, meaning house of God. He then made a vow, pledging his loyalty to God and promising to give back a tenth of all that God would give him. Jacob's vow at Bethel signified more than just a religious ritual. It represented a fundamental shift in his relationship with God. The deceiver was beginning to become a believer, taking his first steps towards becoming the patriarch he was destined to be. But Jacob's path to transformation was just beginning, and the lessons he would learn along the way would shape not only his own life, but the future of an entire nation. From deceiver to devoted servant, Jacob was about to embark on a test of patience that would span 7 long years. But in a land where marriage customs were as complex as family loyalties, would his commitment be enough to secure the hand of his beloved? As Jacob arrived in Haran, he encountered his uncle Laban and his 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah, the elder, had weak eyes, while Rachel was described as beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob was immediately smitten with Rachel, setting the stage for a romantic pursuit that would shape the course of his life. In ancient Mesopotamia, marriage often involved a bride price, a payment from the groom's family to the bride's. This custom served to compensate the bride's family for the loss of her labor and childbearing potential. Jacob, having fled his home with little to his name, offered his labor instead. He struck a deal with Laban, 7 years of work in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. Those 7 years passed quickly for Jacob, such was the depth of his love for Rachel. But on the wedding night, Laban executed a cunning deception. Under the cover of darkness and veils, he substituted Leah for Rachel. Jacob, unaware of the switch, consummated the marriage with the wrong bride. The irony of this situation was not lost on Jacob. The deceiver had become the deceived, echoing his own past actions against his brother Esau. This twist of fate forced Jacob to confront the consequences of deception firsthand, providing a powerful lesson in empathy and justice. When morning came and Jacob discovered the truth, he confronted Laban. His uncle's response revealed the complex social norms at play. It was not their custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Laban offered a solution. Jacob could marry Rachel as well, after completing the bridal week with Leah in exchange for another 7 years of labor. This arrangement introduced Jacob to the practice of polygamy, which was legally and socially accepted in many ancient cultures. While it allowed wealthy individuals to increase their family lineage and labor force, it also set the stage for complex family dynamics and rivalries. Jacob agreed to Laban's terms, marrying Rachel just a week after Leah. His love for Rachel remained strong, but this unconventional start to his family life would have far-reaching consequences. The stage was set for an intense rivalry between the sisters as they competed for Jacob's affection and the honor of bearing his children. As Jacob began his life with 2 wives, he found himself navigating a family situation fraught with potential conflict. The deceiver had not only been deceived, but now faced the challenge of maintaining peace in a household built on a foundation of trickery and divided loyalties. The lessons of love, patience, and the consequences of deception were only beginning to unfold in Jacob's journey. Imagine a family where every newborn child intensifies an already bitter rivalry. As we explore the next chapter in Jacob's life, we'll see how names became battlegrounds and fertility became a currency in a contest that would alter the course of history. The rivalry between Leah and Rachel was deeply rooted in their competition for Jacob's affection and the desire to bear children. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, childbearing was considered a vital duty for women, often seen as a reflection of their worth and status within the family and society. Fertility was highly valued, and women who bore children, especially sons, were often celebrated, while those who remained barren faced social stigma. This cultural context set the stage for an intense competition between the sisters. Leah, though married to Jacob first, lacked his love. She hoped that by bearing children, she could win his affection. Rachel, on the other hand, was Jacob's beloved but initially barren, causing her great distress and jealousy towards her sister. The naming of each child born to Jacob became a powerful expression of the mother's emotions and circumstances. When Leah gave birth to her first son, she named him Reuben, saying, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery, surely my husband will love me now." This pattern continued with each birth, with names reflecting hope, rivalry, and divine favor. As the family grew, so did the complexity of their relationships. Rachel, in her desperation for children, offered her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob as a surrogate. Leah, not to be outdone, did the same with her maidservant Zilpah. This practice, while foreign to modern sensibilities, was an accepted way for barren women to have children in ancient times. The back-and-forth nature of this familial competition led to the birth of 11 sons and 1 daughter. Each child's arrival shifted the dynamics of power and affection within the household. The sons, in order of birth, were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun and Joseph, with Dinah as Jacob's only daughter. This intense rivalry not only shaped their family dynamics, but also played a crucial role in the formation of the Israelite nation. These 12 sons would go on to become the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, their names and characteristics influencing the destiny of their descendants for generations to come. As Jacob's family grew to completion, the stage was set for the next phase of his journey. The years of labor and family strife in Haran had transformed the once solitary fugitive into the patriarch of a large and complex family. But Jacob's time in this land was drawing to a close, and new challenges awaited him on the horizon. Wealth, wives, and children, Jacob had it all. But in the dark of night, he plotted a desperate flight from the very place he'd called home for decades. What could compel a man to abandon his hard-earned life and face the unknown? As the years passed in Haran, Jacob's fortunes had grown considerably, his flocks multiplied, and his household expanded. But with this prosperity came a growing tension. Laban, once welcoming, now eyed Jacob's success with increasing resentment. The same cunning that had allowed Jacob to thrive was now breeding suspicion and hostility in his father-in-law. Sensing the shifting winds, Jacob began to make secret preparations for departure. He confided in Rachel and Leah, explaining his plan to return to Canaan. The sisters, recognizing the deteriorating situation, supported his decision, acknowledging that their father no longer regarded them as he once had. In the midst of these clandestine arrangements, Rachel made a fateful decision. She stole her father's household gods, the teraphim. These small idols were more than mere trinkets. They represented familial blessings and protection. Rachel's theft was an act of rebellion, asserting her independence from Laban's authority while also maintaining a connection to her ancestral home. As Jacob and his family slipped away, Laban was occupied with sheep shearing. It took 3 days for him to discover their absence. Enraged, he pursued them, his anger fueled not just by their departure, but by the theft of his household gods. The stakes were high. Leaving one's father-in-law's household carried significant social and legal implications in ancient cultures, but divine intervention altered the course of this family drama. God appeared to Laban in a dream, warning him not to harm Jacob. This supernatural occurrence underscored the protection Jacob enjoyed, even as he faced the consequences of his actions. When Laban finally caught up with Jacob, the confrontation was tense, but ultimately peaceful. Unable to find his stolen gods, which Rachel had cleverly hidden, Laban was forced to accept Jacob's departure. The two men, once bound by family ties but now separated by mistrust, agreed to establish a covenant. At a place they named Mizpah, meaning watchtower, Jacob and Laban set up a pillar of stones. This physical marker symbolized their agreement to respect each other's boundaries and not to harm one another. It served as both a legal and spiritual reminder of their commitment, a common practice in ancient Near Eastern cultures. As Jacob continued his journey, the resolution with Laban marked the end of one chapter in his life. But the road ahead held new challenges. The prodigal son was returning home, and with each step, he drew closer to confronting the brother he had wronged so many years ago. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to physically wrestle with the divine? For Jacob, this became a startling reality. As he prepared to face his past, an unexpected visitor arrived, initiating a struggle that would alter the course of history. Jacob's journey back to his homeland was fraught with anxiety. The closer he got to Esau's territory, the more his fear grew. The brother he had deceived so many years ago was now a powerful man, and Jacob couldn't shake the dread of potential retribution. As night fell on the banks of the Jabbok River, Jacob found himself alone, having sent his family and possessions ahead. In the darkness, a mysterious figure appeared and began to wrestle with Jacob. This was no ordinary opponent. The struggle lasted all night, pushing Jacob to his physical and spiritual limits. The identity of this nighttime visitor remained ambiguous, but the intensity of the encounter was undeniable. This wrestling match was more than just a physical contest. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, wrestling often symbolized deeper spiritual battles. For Jacob, it represented a confrontation with his past, his fears, and ultimately his relationship with God. As dawn approached, Jacob refused to let go, demanding a blessing from his opponent. It was at this moment that Jacob's identity was forever changed. The mysterious wrestler asked Jacob his name, and upon hearing it declared, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." This new name, Israel, meaning he who struggles with God, marked a profound transformation in Jacob's character and destiny, but transformation often comes at a cost. As the wrestling match concluded, Jacob's opponent struck him on the hip, leaving him with a permanent limp. This injury served as a lasting reminder of his encounter with the divine, a physical mark of his spiritual struggle and newfound identity. Jacob emerged from this night changed in both body and spirit. The man who had once relied on deception and cunning now bore the marks of a direct encounter with God. His new name, Israel, would become the foundation for a nation, signifying a people who, like their forefather, would struggle with God and man. As the sun rose over the Jabbok River, Jacob faced a new day with a new identity. But questions lingered. Would this transformative experience be enough to face the brother he had wronged? Could the man who wrestled with God now wrestle with his own past and find reconciliation? Imagine carrying the weight of betrayal for 2 decades, only to find yourself face to face with the person you wronged. For Jacob and Esau, this wasn't just a family reunion. It was a pivotal moment that would test the limits of forgiveness and reshape the course of biblical history. As Jacob approached the land of his brother, fear gripped his heart. The memories of his deception weighed heavily upon him, and the uncertainty of Esau's reaction loomed large. With careful deliberation, Jacob prepared for their encounter. He divided his family and possessions into groups, strategically arranging them to minimize potential losses if Esau sought revenge. In a gesture laden with cultural significance, Jacob sent waves of gifts ahead of him: goats, sheep, camels, and cattle. This elaborate display wasn't merely an attempt to appease Esau. It was a carefully choreographed ritual of submission and respect. In the ancient Near East, such gestures were crucial in reconciliation efforts, demonstrating humility and a desire for peace. As the brothers drew near, Jacob's anxiety reached its peak. In a final act of supplication, he bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached Esau. This profound display of deference spoke volumes about Jacob's state of mind and his willingness to humble himself before the brother he had wronged. What happened next defied all expectations. Esau, upon seeing his long-lost brother, ran to meet Jacob. Instead of anger or violence, Esau embraced Jacob, kissing him as tears flowed freely between them. This emotional reunion symbolized a powerful moment of healing, illustrating how time and personal growth can mend even the deepest wounds. The brothers' reconciliation carried implications far beyond their personal relationship. It represented the fulfillment of God's promise to Jacob, demonstrating divine providence in bringing peace between 2 estranged siblings who would go on to father great nations. Their embrace bridged not just a family rift, but a potential divide between peoples. As they parted ways, there was a sense of a new beginning. The fear and resentment that had characterized their relationship for so long had given way to forgiveness and acceptance. Jacob, who had wrestled with God and man, found that his greatest victory came not through cunning or strength, but through humility and reconciliation. Yet as Jacob continued his journey, new challenges awaited on the horizon. The reconciliation with Esau marked the end of one chapter in his life, but the story of Jacob and his descendants was far from over. The trials and transformations that lay ahead would continue to shape the destiny of a people and leave an indelible mark on history. Just when Jacob thought he had overcome his greatest challenge, a new crisis emerged that would make his wrestle with God seem like child's play. How would the patriarch navigate the treacherous waters of tribal justice when his own children become the aggressors? After years of wandering, Jacob settled his family near the city of Shechem, hoping to find peace and stability. However, this newfound tranquility was shattered when his daughter Dinah ventured out to visit the women of the land. Shechem, the son of the local ruler Hamor, saw Dinah and forcibly took her, violating her against her will. This act of violence against Jacob's daughter set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences. When news of Dinah's rape reached Jacob and his sons, they were filled with grief and rage. Hamor approached Jacob's family, seeking to arrange a marriage between Shechem and Dinah. In ancient Near Eastern societies, such negotiations were common in the aftermath of sexual violations, often serving as a means to restore honor and forge alliances between tribes. The Shechemites proposed intermarriage and shared land rights, presenting it as an opportunity for mutual benefit. However, Jacob's sons had other plans. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, devised a cunning and brutal scheme. They agreed to the marriage proposal on the condition that all the men of Shechem be circumcised. This request was more than a religious observance. It was a calculated move to render the Shechemites vulnerable. 3 days after the circumcision, when the men of Shechem were still in pain, Simeon and Levi launched their attack. They entered the city unopposed and slaughtered all the males, including Hamor and Shechem. The brothers then took Dinah from Shechem's house and proceeded to plunder the city, taking captives and seizing livestock and possessions. The violent response of Simeon and Levi reflected the concept of collective revenge in tribal societies. Their actions were not just personal vengeance, but a demonstration of familial honor and a message to neighboring tribes about the consequences of violating their women. However, the brutality of their response went far beyond the norms of justice, even by the standards of their time. Jacob, upon learning of his son's actions, was deeply troubled. He feared retaliation from neighboring peoples and the damage to his family's reputation. The patriarch's rebuke to Simeon and Levi revealed the strain now present in their relationship. "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." Forced to flee once again, Jacob uprooted his family from Shechem. The tragedy had not only cost innocent lives, but had also strained the bonds within Jacob's own household. As the patriarch led his family away from the scene of violence, he carried with him the weight of his son's actions and the knowledge that his journey, fraught with challenges, was far from over. As Jacob led his family away from Shechem, little did he know that his greatest heartbreak lay just ahead. What profound loss would shake the very foundation of his faith and family? Jacob's return to Bethel marked a spiritual homecoming. It was here, years ago, that he had first encountered God in a dream. Now, with his large family in tow, Jacob built an altar to honor the divine presence that had guided him through countless trials. God appeared to Jacob once more, reaffirming the promises made to Abraham and Isaac. He blessed Jacob and reiterated his new name, Israel, a testament to the patriarch's transformed identity. But joy soon gave way to sorrow as the family continued their journey. Near Ephrath, Rachel went into labor with her second son. Unlike her previous pregnancy, this one proved dangerous and difficult. The midwife tried to comfort Rachel, assuring her that she would have another son. However, the birth exacted a terrible price. As Rachel's life slipped away, she named her newborn son Ben-Oni, meaning son of my sorrow. This name captured the anguish of her final moments and the grief that would shadow the child's beginning. Jacob, perhaps unable to bear the constant reminder of his loss, renamed the boy Benjamin, meaning son of the right hand or son of strength. This duality in naming reflected the complex emotions surrounding the birth. Deep sorrow intertwined with hope for the future. Rachel's death was a devastating blow to Jacob. She had been his first love, the woman for whom he had labored 14 years. Her loss created a void that would never truly be filled. Jacob buried Rachel near Ephrath, marking her grave with a pillar that would stand as a testament to his enduring love. The impact of Rachel's death rippled through the family structure. Jacob, already prone to favoritism, would now focus his affections even more intensely on Joseph and Benjamin, Rachel's sons. This shift in family dynamics would sow seeds of resentment among the other brothers, setting the stage for future conflicts. As Jacob stood before Rachel's grave, he faced a future he had never envisioned, one without his beloved by his side. The man who had wrestled with God and reconciled with his brother now confronted a loss that would test the very limits of his faith. Yet even as he mourned, new challenges loomed on the horizon, promising to push Jacob to his breaking point and reveal the true depth of his transformation. In the wake of Rachel's death, Jacob clung tightly to her memory through his love for her sons. But fate had a cruel twist in store. How would a father's favoritism spark a chain of events that would tear his family apart and challenge everything he believed? Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, held a special place in Jacob's heart. As the son of his beloved wife, Joseph enjoyed privileges that his brothers could only envy. Jacob's affection was made tangible in the form of a richly ornamented robe, a visible symbol of his favor that set Joseph apart from his siblings. This preferential treatment, however, sowed seeds of resentment among the other brothers. The tension within the family reached a breaking point when Joseph began sharing his dreams with his brothers. In these visions, Joseph saw himself elevated above his family members, with sheaves of wheat and celestial bodies bowing down to him. To his brothers, already stinging from their father's favoritism, these dreams seemed like boastful claims of superiority. Driven by jealousy and anger, Joseph's brothers plotted against him. When Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers tending the flocks, they saw an opportunity for revenge. Initially planning to kill him, they instead decided to throw him into a cistern. Reuben, the eldest, secretly intended to rescue Joseph later, but before he could act, the other brothers sold Joseph to a passing caravan of Ishmaelite traders. To cover their crime, the brothers resorted to a cruel deception that echoed their father's own past actions. They took Joseph's prized robe, tore it, and dipped it in goat's blood. Presenting this grim evidence to Jacob, they led him to believe that his beloved son had been killed by a wild animal. Jacob's reaction to this news was one of profound grief. "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave," he declared, tearing his clothes and putting on sackcloth. This physical expression of mourning was a cultural norm, but Jacob's refusal to be comforted spoke to the depth of his anguish. The loss of Joseph, coming so soon after Rachel's death, plunged Jacob into a dark period of sorrow that affected the entire family. Unbeknownst to Jacob, Joseph's story was far from over. The Ishmaelite traders sold him into slavery in Egypt, where he would face trials and triumphs that would shape his character and ultimately determine the fate of his entire family. But for now, Jacob was left with only his grief, unaware of the greater plan unfolding through these tragic events. Years would pass before the truth would come to light. Years filled with silent guilt for the brothers and unrelenting sorrow for Jacob. Little did they know that Joseph's disappearance was just the beginning of a journey that would test their faith, challenge their relationships, and ultimately lead to an unexpected reunion that would change the course of history. Fate works in mysterious ways. The very disaster that threatened to destroy Jacob's family would become the key to unlocking a long-buried secret. As a famine gripped the land, how would a desperate journey for survival lead to an encounter that would heal decades of heartache? The famine that struck Canaan was severe, leaving Jacob and his sons with dwindling resources. With no other option, Jacob sent his sons to Egypt, a land known for its ability to store grain during times of plenty. Little did they know that this journey would set in motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. Upon arriving in Egypt, the brothers encountered a powerful official who held control over the distribution of grain. Unbeknownst to them, this man was their long-lost brother Joseph, now risen to a position of authority in Pharaoh's court. Joseph, recognizing his brothers immediately, chose not to reveal his identity. Instead, he subjected them to a series of tests, accusing them of being spies and demanding they bring their youngest brother Benjamin to prove their honesty. Jacob, still haunted by the loss of Joseph, was reluctant to let Benjamin go. The thought of losing Rachel's only remaining son was almost unbearable. However, as the famine worsened and their supplies dwindled, Jacob eventually relented, entrusting Benjamin to his brother's care with a heavy heart. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph's emotional resolve began to crumble. Seeing his full brother after so many years stirred deep feelings within him. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, Joseph revealed his true identity to his astonished brothers. The emotional impact of this revelation was profound, as years of guilt, fear, and longing came crashing together in a moment of stunned silence, followed by tearful embraces. As news of Joseph's survival reached Jacob, the aging patriarch was overcome with disbelief and joy. Jacob's reaction, as recorded in Genesis, captures the depth of his emotion. "I'm convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." This sudden reversal of fortune must have seemed like a dream to Jacob, who had mourned his son for so long. Jacob's journey to Egypt marked the final chapter of his life's adventures. Reunited with Joseph after years of separation, Jacob found peace in his twilight years. As he embraced his long-lost son, the story of Jacob came full circle. The deceiver who had fled his home in fear now returned as Israel, the patriarch of a growing nation. But while Jacob's personal journey was nearing its end, the legacy he would leave behind was only just beginning to unfold. As Jacob's life drew to a close, he prepared to leave his sons with more than just material inheritance. What if his final words could shape the destiny of entire nations? Jacob's deathbed prophecies would reveal unexpected twists of fate for each of his 12 sons, setting the stage for centuries of history yet to unfold. In his twilight years, Jacob found himself far from the land of his fathers, settled in Egypt under the protection of his long-lost son Joseph. As he felt his strength waning, Jacob called his sons to his bedside. This gathering was more than a simple farewell. It was a moment of profound spiritual and historical significance. Each son would receive not just a blessing, but a glimpse into the future of their descendants. As Jacob began to speak, it became clear that these were no ordinary blessings. His words carried the weight of prophecy, often surprising in their content and specificity. Some sons received glowing praise and promises of prosperity, while others faced stark rebukes for past actions. Judah, for instance, was likened to a lion and promised leadership, foreshadowing the royal line that would emerge from his tribe. Joseph received blessings of fruitfulness and strength, reflecting his crucial role in preserving the family. The literary structure of Jacob's blessings is a masterpiece of ancient Hebrew poetry. Rich in symbolism and vivid imagery, each pronouncement was carefully crafted to convey deeper meanings. Parallelism, a common feature in Hebrew poetry, was used extensively, with ideas repeated and expanded upon for emphasis. Animal imagery featured prominently, with suns compared to lions, wolves, and deer, each metaphor laden with cultural and spiritual significance. These blessings weren't just poetic flourishes, they were blueprints for the future. Each prophecy foreshadowed key characteristics and events in the history of the 12 tribes of Israel. Zebulun's association with sea trade, Issachar's agricultural pursuits, and Dan's role in judgment all came to pass in the subsequent history of the Israelite nation. Even the rebukes, such as those given to Reuben and Simeon, played out in the reduced prominence of their tribes. As Jacob neared his final moments, he made one last request. He instructed his sons to bury him not in Egypt, but in the cave of Machpelah in Canaan, alongside Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and his first wife Leah. This wish underscored Jacob's enduring connection to the Promised Land and his faith in God's covenant. With his last breath, Jacob saw the beginnings of God's promises fulfilled. The 12 sons gathered around him would indeed become a great nation, just as God had foretold so many years ago. As Jacob closed his eyes for the final time, he left behind a legacy that would shape the course of history for millennia to come. But the story of Jacob's descendants was only just beginning. The seeds planted in these prophetic blessings would grow into the rich tapestry of Israelite history, with each tribe playing its unique role in the unfolding drama of God's plan for his chosen people. Jacob's journey from deceiver to patriarch reveals how God can work through even deeply flawed individuals to accomplish his purposes. Despite Jacob's scheming nature, God chose him to father a nation and fulfill the covenant promises. This offers hope that our own shortcomings need not disqualify us from playing a role in God's plan. As we reflect on Jacob's transformative wrestling match with God, we might consider what struggles in our own lives could be shaping us. Are there areas where God is pushing us out of our comfort zone to build our character? Jacob's story reminds us that these difficult encounters often precede profound change. Ultimately, Jacob's tale is one of redemption. The man who fled his home in disgrace returned as the renamed Israel, reconciled with his brother and blessed by God. It's a powerful testament that even after a lifetime of mistakes, it's never too late to change course and embrace transformation.